Hello. First of all, I would like to express my sincere apologies that we had to cancel this webinar last week and postpone it due to a sudden illness. But luckily, we are here today and we are already eager to share some interesting research findings with you. And as you know, we are going to talk about a topic that we actually haven't covered, at least so specifically, at EUROSTUDENT Talks before. It's refugees in higher education. And we're going to discuss this matter based on a German example today. I am absolutely glad to welcome here two speakers, Jana Berg and Michael Grüttner. I will very shortly introduce both of them, and then we can already hear what they find out during their research. So our first speaker, Jana Berg, is a postdoctoral researcher at the German Center for Higher Education Research and Science Studies, and the co-editor of Higher Education Quarterly. Her research focuses on refugee education, higher education governance, and transdisciplinary collaboration. And since 2015, our second speaker, Michael Grüttner, has been working also at the German Center for Higher Education Research and Science Studies. Michael studied the interdisciplinary degree programs in social economics at the universities of Hamburg and Erlangen-Nuremberg, with a sociological focus each. In 2022, Michael received his PhD in sociology at the Leibniz University, Hanover. Previously, he has worked as a researcher at the Institute for Employment Research in Nuremberg and the National Education Panel Study. Michael conducts research in higher education and migration, social and academic integration of refugees, as well as lifelong education and continuing higher education. So you now know a bit about our speakers, and I think it's time that we can start. So please, Jana, feel free to share your screen and begin your presentation if you're ready.
Thank you. I think you should be able to see the presentation now.
Yeah, and you can put it to the presentation mode as well. Yeah, it works.
It should be. Okay. Hi. Hello, everybody. Today we're gonna talk about the situation of refugees in German higher education, both in study preparation and in higher education. And I'm gonna make a start and talk about study preparation for refugees in Germany. So to give a bit of a context, in 2015 and 16, as we surely all heard, Germany experienced a peak in asylum application. And of those newly arriving refugees, about 1/3 of them held school degrees that would allow them access to German higher education or likely to be acknowledged as access documents. And many of them reported very high educational aspirations. Those high aspirations were very welcomed by German politics and higher education practitioners, as higher education is understood to be crucial for the social and economic integration of migrants and forced migrants. Education is seen as a basis of hope and of building a new life, whether that might be in the home country or a host country. And specifically in Germany, with a shortage of professional in the German labor market, refugees or well-educated refugees were also seen as a good potential for the German labor force. Nonetheless, as universities don't usually record the legal status of their students, and there was very little targeted support for refugee students in Germany before 2016, there was very little practical experience, and also very few academic studies had been conducted on the topic. Before 2016, most studies that were available internationally had dealt with English-speaking countries. And after 2016, the practical and academic interest in the topic rose. So to support refugees into German higher education, the federal, but partly also state governments launched funding schemes. The biggest example is the Integra funding scheme, which was provided with 100 million euros between 2015 and 19. It was meant to enable and it did enable higher education institutions to formalize refugee student support. And initially, the focus of those support programs was actually on study preparations and formal access to higher education. Partly, they also addressed social inclusion, but it was a lot about preparing and getting refugees ready and formally allowed to study in Germany. After that first round ended, the new round after 2019 additionally also focused on student and alumni support. In 2017, at the German Center for Higher Education Research and Science Studies, we started the Wege project, which was led by Michael Grüttner. And we investigated pathways into higher education for refugees. So we looked into successful study preparations and higher education access. So basically we looked at two main course structures. One of them was language classes that were meant to show the necessary language proficiency. And on the other hand, we looked at classes at preparatory colleges for those students whose school degrees were not acknowledged as higher education entrance qualifications. We looked at those in a qualitative and a quantitative longitudinal panel, so we could investigate the situation in the classes and then also follow our panelists after they had finished their courses. So the initial big question was, what are the actual support needs of refugee students? How does their situation differ from international students that came to Germany on a visum? And it turned out that they partly face very similar challenges that are partly amplified. For example, language proficiency is a challenge for all non-native speakers. But refugees had to prepare under a bit of different circumstances. So many international students had previously planned to come to Germany, had started to learn the language before they arrived, while many refugee students reported that they only started learning German on a serious level after entering the country. In addition to those similar challenges like financial challenges, social isolation, refugees also reported some specific challenges that were linked to the circumstances of migration and the German asylum system, also their experience of forced migration, such as missing documents, mental challenges linked to worries about loved ones, the situation in their home country, or their own security to be able to stay, and also gaps in their educational biography that might result from having to migrate, but also having to attend in integration classes. On the other hand, those that were recognized as refugees can access national student support schemes like public loans. So they really are in a very specific situation between international and domestic students. So we were able to follow the students throughout the courses, as I said, and we started to wonder, what does success actually mean? So we could look into how many students in the final round of our quantitative survey actually successfully completed the course by passing the test. But we started to wonder what that meant in their individual biography. And the qualitative interviews showed us very different outcomes on an individual level. So we newly looked at the materials and conceptualized success as a combination of increased opportunities for realization of individual objectives and also a subjective appreciation of those newly available positions in this case, based on the educational success and whether or not an individual identified with the new position. And considering study preparation courses, there are basically 3 transition outcomes. First of all, after successfully completing the course, students might enroll in a higher education institution. They might find alternatives. In the cases that we looked at, that mostly meant vocational training or like further education. Or they could not still be in study preparation, but have started a new study preparation course, for example. So we had interviewed people that were in all of those situations, and some of them really appreciated their new position. For example, one person, there was one person that was enrolled, and they really identified with the subject they were studying, felt very well informed on their outlook with those studies, and experienced the entire situation of having successfully passed the study preparation course, enrolled, and were now successfully studying as as an experience of high self-efficacy. Another person had decided to go into vocational training or further training with a very secure perspective to stay in this position and have a good professional development. This was the result of a very well-informed counseling at a higher education institution, where they discussed or learned about all different options and decided to pursue this one, which provided a very secure and good outlook, which they appreciated. And they were also able to use the language skills that they had obtained in the preparation class as an asset in this new pathway. And finally, there was one person doing another study preparation class who reported that they had overcome a very deep crisis out of mental challenges such as the fear of deportation. They had been going through a severe mental health crisis, and after overcoming this, re-entered study preparation. So this new course was perceived as a new chance after a crisis to really follow through with it. On the other hand, another person doing a study preparation course had not passed the exam, felt not very well informed, and perceived the situation to be like a stuck place, as if they were wasting their time waiting for something that might not happen. And they were really struggling with wondering whether they wasted the years that they spent in study preparation. Another example for someone who took an alternative path is someone who ended up in vocational training after having strong difficulties finding a position. They had experienced discrimination in the labor market, but really decided to go this way because they presumed that being part of vocational training would provide a better outlook for protection, security, and being able to stay in Germany. So it felt like a really externally determined decision to them. And finally, there was also the case that someone had successfully enrolled, which technically would count as the goal of study preparation, but they didn't really identify with the subject they were studying. The social climate was really distant and neutral. They felt really isolated. So they lacked social and academic integration in the higher education institution. And this goes to show that each of those transition outcomes on an individual level should only be seen as a success when they match the expectations and needs of that individual person. So we identified some factors. Those are, of course, not exclusive, but some of the things that we saw that played into whether or not the identification with a transition outcome was good was whether the person perceived to have had agency in this decision, whether their actions resulted in a feeling of self-efficacy, whether external factors or a voluntary decision was made, or a very crucial point was whether they perceived to have had all the necessary information and awareness of educational pathways and what they would mean to make an informed voluntary decision. Yeah, that's it from my end, and we're going to look at some of those people that actually enrolled at university in Michael's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana. Before Michael starts, I'm asking if there are any questions from the audience to Jana before we continue. Anything you would like to ask or comment about this presentation? Actually, I was wondering that you mentioned that there was both public funding schemes put in place, established, and also student support mechanisms at higher education institutions. Do you know if there have been any studies which look into that what is more important or more efficient in that sense? That is it more like the funding needed or more actually the, let's say, soft measures or support measures to encourage refugees to be in higher education, or like how would you comment?
I actually wrote my dissertation on the way higher education institutions established their support. And while there was ongoing support for refugees that really was started on all levels, like presidents, but also students just started to do whatever they could in their position. For the staff, this often happened off the clock. And it burned out really quickly because it was just like an additional burden. So I think the activities at higher education institutions and the public funding schemes are not two different options, but the funding is needed to ensure that there is an ongoing availability of support so that people can actually be hired. And at many German higher education institutions, there was one person specifically in charge of counseling refugee students. And that is someone that is able to gather relevant information and really be familiar with the needs and situations and able to establish the necessary networks within the institution. So I think they should go hand in hand. And also for student engagement, some higher education institution actually established voluntary programs that would result in ECTS, like intercultural engagement ECTS. So types of credits that the students could then use. So I think, yeah, it should go hand in hand.
It's logical, and I think it's also about sustainability of these measures, that it's not something pop-up mechanism that you're doing and for a while and then abandoning them. Okay, but actually before we move on to Michael's presentation, Rebecca has raised hand and wants to ask or comment something, so please feel free.
Okay, so I'm Rebecca Nyland from University of Helsinki. Thank you for your presentation. What I wanted to ask is kind of like how much there is in these preparatory courses, there is a place for refugee students for the kind of like guidance and reflecting the situation. Do they have kind of like career counseling, or is there kind of like counseling, but what is their situation with their previous studies and how they fit into so on? So did you have that coming up in your survey and so?
For the preparatory courses, I'm not aware that there is a standardized situation for this. Michael, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that it really depends on what kind of teacher they have, and also whether they are in a refugee class or in a mixed class, where there were just spaces made available for refugees. So I think that would really depend on who they meet. At universities, the specific programs that were established often have one person in place, at least one person in place to specifically counsel refugees. And I think that's a really great asset, because they, as I said, were available for really this situation-specific questions. But in the classes, I couldn't really say.
Thank
I
you.
think if I can give some more words on the topic, it really depends, and it is really very different from university to university. So there's no standard approach. So it could be that at a university in city A has coupled preparatory courses with career guidance, and in university B it is not. So it's a little bit lottery. So
Okay, so the situation is uneven in that sense that these approaches can be different. Okay, but thanks for the question, Rebecca, and thanks for answering. I think that you can continue then, Michael.
okay, thank you. So I will share my presentation as soon as I am able to do that. So now I think you should see my slide. Okay. So after Jana has addressed the question of study preparation already, and of transitions, it is now consequent to go a little further and to take a look at the situation of refugee students, or the refugee students face while studying in higher education degree programs. So this is the shift now. And so as we have seen from the talk of Jana, many refugees succeed in study preparation and in access to university degree programs, as you will, against the odds. So there are unfortunately very few data on the amount of refugee students at higher education institutions in Germany, because of universities in Germany don't collect residence permit or something like that as data. So statistic bureaus in Germany, of the federal states in Germany, they don't provide any statistical data on the numbers of refugees at higher education degree programs, but they do provide information on the nationality of students. So we can have a guess. So on the numbers of refugee students at higher education institutions by looking at students with Syrian nationality. And here we see that in the year 2023, already more than 20,000 Syrian students were enrolled at higher education institutions in Germany. And you can think of 2/3 of refugee students come from Syria. So that this is a guess on the what for the numbers of refugee students at higher education institutions. So but there's very little literature, research literature on the German situation, and because so far the literature is limited to study preparation for the German case. And as Jana has told us, there are some barriers for refugees to succeed in study preparation and to access higher education degree programs, as financial burden or social isolation, language and information barriers, and so on. But there are also some resources because many of them already have study experiences from abroad, and also if you compare refugee study applicants with other international study applicants, they have some more German language use in free time, as you will. So because they are already a little more integrated into the German society, because they came as refugees, as asylum applicants to Germany, and already stayed maybe for 1 or 2 or 3 years, and then got into the preparation courses. So okay, but there are a few qualitative studies on the situation of refugee students in degree programs at German higher education institutions, and they show experience of misrecognition and devaluation and identity struggles and stigmatization of refugees. And also, again, they show that financial burden and language barriers are still a problem for refugees after they transit or after they accessed higher education degree programs. So we wanted to ask how successful are refugees in studying at universities in Germany. And if we show at the literature, we can see that for the German case, estimated dropout rates are very higher among international students and also other students with migration background in Germany. And the social and academic integration is crucial for persistence at student and for student success. And so we wanted to use this lens, and so you can say, if you use this lens, students access higher education degree programs with different resources, and then there are processes of social integration on the one hand and academic integration on the other hand, and these processes largely determine the retention and also the degree access of refugee students, but also of other student groups. And and today I wanted to look at academic integration as one of these central processes. So, but what could play a role here? If you look at the international literature, you can see that language barriers and but also social origin and financial problems and so on still can play a role and influence the academic integration and therefore influence also the student success. We can see that there's restricted feelings of restricted belonging to higher education, feelings of misrecognition or stigma, and are reported in a few studies. And so this can also play a role for academic integration. And you can also think of biographical age and family obligation, because of refugee students more often than other student groups are of older age and already maybe have children, something like that. And but on the other hand, as literature has shown, there are very high aspirations and some resources of resilience, personally resilience, and maybe this could buffer something of this obstacles. And so, but if we want to look or to take a little more theoretical lens on the question, why should there be differences between refugee students and other student groups in terms of academic integration? We wanted to look or we wanted to use the lens of migration channels on the one hand. So you can think of different migration groups migrate from one country to another country by using different migration channels. What means by mobility pathways that are structured by different actors. And these mobility pathways then create specific opportunities and constraints for these migrants within the host country. So, and you can think of maybe labor migration or student migration or refugee migration as different of these migration channels, these mobility pathways. So, and this is the one theoretical lens that we can employ on this topic. And the other theoretical lens is socialization. As you can expect, different educational systems and academic cultures between different national contexts, and so different academic socialization, and this depends largely on the country of schooling. So, and so taken together, we can expect that maybe refugee students could lack of resources for academic integration, but they could also be personal resources of resilience. So it is a little bit unclear what the outcome is. And now it is important to clarify what student groups we want to compare with. So, and here we could do different or use different approaches. We could compare refugee students with other migrant background students, because we could say refugee background is one form of migration background. Or we could compare refugee students with domestic students, because you can argue that refugees can be understood as domestic students with international needs. this is a perspective that would be applied especially to the UK, where refugee students also are treated institutionally as domestic students and not as international students. Or you can also compare refugee students with other international students by understanding them as international students with domestic needs, would to some extent apply to the German case, because refugees are treated institutionally or legal as international students by higher education law in Germany, but they have some domestic needs because they did not come for studying to Germany, but more for establishing a new life or something like that. Yeah, as you will. Okay. So we decided to compare the following groups. Yes, we wanted to compare, on the one hand, a refugee student as a student who has applied for asylum and then taking up studies, or if there's no asylum application. So we want to compare this on the one hand, and on the other hand, we wanted to compare the foreign higher education, or the higher education entrance qualification, if it is a foreign higher education entrance qualification, or if it is not, if it is from Germany. So if you will. So, and then we have international students with and without refugee background, and we have domestic students with and without refugee background. So, and then we can expect that these groups may have different resources for establishing academic integration. And you can expect that the situation for domestic students as the best, or as the reference situation, as you will. And then you can expect domestic refugee students that are in a comparatively good situation with respect to educational socialization or educational acculturation, and in a bad situation with respect to migration channel. You can look at international students without refugee background that are in a good situation with respect to the migration channel, and comparatively, and in a comparatively bad situation with respect to the educational socialization. And you can look at international refugee students which would have disadvantages in both of these dimensions. So we used data from the German Studierendenbefragung. So it's the student survey for whole Germany. It's a representative student sample of Germany, and it is almost represents the student subsample, if you will, of EUROSTUDENT. So, and we restricted our analysis to undergraduate students, so bachelor, BA, and or the German Staatsexamen, and then we restricted to the split sample within the Studierendenbefragung that includes questions on academic integration, because not every student has answered questions, there was a random split sample. So not every student has answered every topic, but the split samples was at random, so it was no problem to restrict to the split sample that has answered questions on academic integration. So, okay. And this is the most important question. So we have a self-assessed academic performance in comparison with fellow students on a Likert scale. So this is our dependent variable, if you will. So, and we did OLS regression analysis, and to look into the data. Here you see some descriptions of the variables with respect to the 4 student groups. And here you see that there are some differences in terms of age. So refugee students are somewhat of an older age than domestic students, and also in terms of gender there are some differences. Also in terms of social origin there are some differences. Here you see that international students without a refugee background have a very high rate of academic parents, as parents with an academic educational background, and refugee students or also domestic students have not. So, so there are some differences, and if you look at external resources, financial resources, or the housing situation, you see that refugee students rated these resources less in comparison with the other student groups. So there are some disadvantages here, and you also see some slightly differences when it comes to language competencies. And we ask of writing competencies, oral competencies, and text comprehension. And there are also some differences here, especially for international refugee students, which means that they had a foreign higher education entrance qualification, and so have some more problems on these variables reported. So, okay. And if we look now on the academic integration of these 4 student groups, we see that refugee students domestic students with a refugee background, but also international students with a refugee background, both are at lower levels in terms of academic integration in comparison to other international students, and of course in comparison to domestic students. And if we look at regression models to explain these differences a little bit, we see that these group differences persist. Also, if we control for age, for gender, or for academic family background, but they slightly diminish if we control for language competencies. In terms of international refugee students, the effect is almost insignificant. And after the addition of competency and into the models, And if we look at the model 4, the last model, financial security and housing situation, then also domestic refugee students have no disadvantages anymore. So we can say there is mechanisms of financial and housing or of structural disadvantages that can explain to a large amount the disadvantages of domestic refugee students and also of international refugee students in terms of academic integration. So in summary, we can see academic integration of refugee students is reduced in comparison to other domestic and international students. And external structural obstacles, financial burdens and housing are relevant in this relevant risk factors here. And language competencies are particularly relevant for academic integration of refugee students with a foreign higher education entrance qualification. There are, of course, some limitations. You can imagine cross-cultural differences. You can imagine the limited number of covariates, but also that we could not do any longitudinal approach here, and also no intersectional approach so far. But here we have first evidence on persisting disadvantages of refugee students after the successful transition into higher education degree programs. And refugee students may be at risk of dropping out. Therefore, refugee students may be at risk of dropping out and need more attention by higher education policy, but also higher education institutions in Germany, and support structures and language courses that accompany the degree programs and not stop when the transition into higher education was successful, would be needed. And also accurate and tailored information and guidance regarding vocational career paths and alternatives to higher education degree programs would also be relevant for refugee students to decide on on their career plans, on informations, and in relation to their own personal goals. So, okay. So I have to thank you, and looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for the presentation. It was really good insight and also good recommendations that you just mentioned. Any questions? Comments? Anybody? You can both post a question or comments to the chat or raise hand and let us know that you would like to ask something. As people are still thinking, actually, I was wondering about one thing, that we so nicely and logically start from the study preparation phase, and now you talked about refugees in degree programs. So I was wondering that has there already been any research about alumni so that we know that what are those refugees that have successfully graduated from higher education institutions? How are they doing? Are they doing well? Do they work on similar fields that they acquired their degree? Do we know already anything about that?
To my knowledge, research on alumni so far is limited to Australia and UK and countries like that, and or Canada, maybe Canada, but Germany, there are not that much studies on that topic till now.
But perhaps there is then further.
They are needed, of course, yeah.
Because probably now it's the time that when they arrived around 2015, 16, and maybe didn't start at first, but have started higher education studies later, then we can assume that they have graduated or being graduating. So maybe after some years, it will be another EUROSTUDENT Talks. We'll see. But Rebecca has a question, please.
It seems I'm the only one asking the questions. I wanted to know how did you, in your study, how did it was kind of like found out that the person has a refugee background? Because I know at least in Finland it is very difficult to say if the person has actually if they do have a refugee background. We don't actually know that. We do have procedures in case they are lacking the papers and support in that case. So that might be the place where we find out that they are refugees, but otherwise they just basically immigrants or people with an immigrant background. We don't know if they are refugees. So kind of like, how do you? Was it the question that you was asked that they are refugees and then telling and following this study
yeah.
support and progress and so on?
Yeah, thank you. This was part of the questionnaire. We asked study participants to tell us what was the way they came to Germany, actually. So, and was it on student visa or was it on asylum application or something like that? So they could answer, and hopefully they answered the right way, and yeah, we can learn from this data.
But are higher education institutions allowed to ask about the background when someone is in the admission phase, that they know already that, okay, this is a refugee background student, maybe he or she needs more support or specific measures to support him or her? Is there anything that like that in place?
If there is some support structure at a university, so for instance, language courses or something like that, that are supported by the Integra program, they should ask about the resident permit or something like that, because these support structures need this information. It's the basis of this support structures. But if not, there is no no way to ask every student applicant to give information on their resident permit. So it's not study relevant. So they don't have to give any information on that topic or something like that. And higher education institutions normally do not collect data on that.
I think that sometimes they have voluntary email lists, for example, to provide information, but they would never publish that. So even if they have some voluntary information, it's not accessible when it's outside of formal support structures.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks for your answer. There are also one question or comment in the chat that many students are working along studies. Is there support for refugee students to integrate in some maybe informal arrangements?
Some of the universities that I've interviewed for my dissertation were planning to start something like internship programs, especially in study programs where it was mandatory to do an internship, but sometimes also beyond that. I don't know if there's something that is nationwide, but individual institutions were definitely planning to do that in early 2020. And I think some of them hopefully have realized that, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine that having nationwide approaches is a bit complicated in Germany as well because of
Yes.
the that you have, that there can be very different systems in place. Any other questions or comments?
But what I want to comment on that is my impression was that the further along somebody is in their studies, the less relevance universities are trying to give to the legal status. So while study preparation is very focused on partly really having refugee classes and refugee-specific classes, it was my impression that many practitioners actually want to decrease the importance of that status and try to like provide additional services, but also try to turn refugees into sort of regular students in a way, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe my last question to both of you, that if you could mention or pick only one policy recommendation or a recommendation to policymakers and higher education institutions regarding refugees in higher education, what would that be?
That's a hard question.
Maybe I make a start. So for policy, I would definitely recommend to keep the support going so that all the knowledge that has been gathered and all the experiences that have been made can really sustainably be continued. That is one thing. And for higher education institutions, I think Michelle already put it very well, that there should be support available, and specifically information should be made available for refugees to be able to navigate their educational pathways.
Mm-hmm. So it's about the awareness that they know the opportunities and the support systems.
Yeah, and if I can add something on that point, for policymakers outside of higher education policy, because that's not the only point where you can do something. With respect to migration policy, we also can think of when people apply for asylum, when they apply for asylum, to give them some information on what could what could be the best perspective for them to integrate in a sustainable perspective. What can be on the long run the best pathway to integrate into German society and labor market and so on. And for some people, it surely is to get a higher education degree and to continue on a formally established educational and professional career or something like that. And for other people, it would be to have some tailored further education or professional education or something like that, that has a relation to the goals of refugees, the individual refugees. So as early as possible, give them the information they need to pursue. Yeah.
Thanks, both of you, for very good recommendations to wrap this discussion up. And of course, many thanks for joining us today and being here and sharing the results and your findings. And also thanks to all our listeners for listening and for asking and commenting. I already want to shout out the next date for next EUROSTUDENT Talks. It's very soon, because April webinar was in the end a bit later than we expected, but still very great and now done. So please save the date of 9th of May already in your calendars. So we start revealing international EUROSTUDENT 8 results to the wider public. So topical modules will be the first things to cover, and especially digitalization and the impact of COVID-19. So 9th of May is the next EUROSTUDENT Talks date, and then see you again. Thank you all and have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.